If you're making a period piece or you're telling a story from a different world, you should consider how the production design will affect the look. It begins with what you put in front of the camera and how you film it. It's not just that your character is wearing a period costume, it's also the lighting, framing, filters, and more. And after all that, there's still the edit, audio, music, and finally effects, such as changing the look with a plugin. But when should you use a plugin versus doing it yourself? And if you do it yourself, when should you build the effect in the edit versus doing it for real with hardware? There are things you need to consider besides simply changing the look of your video after you stop recording. You can't just slap on a LUT or plugin and call it good. I'm not saying everything needs to be done authentically, such as only using period video equipment. It would lend some serious authenticity to your project, but often what you can do is determined by the available time and money. Taking into account your available resources, do some research and planning and figure out which parts of your project would benefit from being done in production versus being done in the edit. The first thing to do is to think about all these things as you consider your intended result. Begin with the end in mind and work backwards as you plan your shoot in pre-production. This might just be for a few shots or the whole project, but it's important if you want things to look their best. That said, you don't always want something to be perfectly realistic. For example, almost no one uses analog equipment for a surveillance video anymore, but if you make it black and white, throw on some scan lines, then everyone knows they're looking at a security camera, even if it's completely wrong. On the flip side, if you make it 100% authentic, it may actually pull the viewer out of the story you're trying to tell if it doesn't feel right, even though it's technically correct. We're not emulating reality, we're emulating the feeling of reality, and it's that feeling that will give your world believability. We'll look at some specific examples later, but for now, there's something else to consider before you press record. In the case of emulating old material, what media was actually involved? Is it supposed to be an old film? Was it shot on film and then converted to video? Was it native to video? Was it broadcast on TV, or was it straight to VHS or DVD? Or if not old media, is it a POV shot or picture-in-picture? For example, if a character is watching something from the news, did you just composite in a clip from the fourth wall? Or did you film it differently, so that it looks like it was captured by a camera in that world? Or what about science fiction? Or fantasy worlds? Technically, these are visual effects, and it can get quite complex if you're using many effects or combining together many different pieces of footage. But whether it's simple or not, if you're not doing it all in camera, then once you stop recording, it starts with a plugin. Plugins aren't always about changing the look or sound, but that's what I'm focusing on here. The advantage of using plugins is that you're adding it to your footage after the fact, so you can experiment and change your mind all you want without ruining anything. And no matter how much you change, you can always press undo. The disadvantage is that unless it's included in your editing software, there's usually an extra cost involved, whether it's a one-time fee or a subscription. Further, there can be compatibility issues when upgrading your editing software, or trying to open old projects with a newer version of the plugin or host software. Or worst case scenario, the company could discontinue a plugin you rely on, or even go out of business. But it's not all doom and gloom. Some of the reasons to use plugins is that you can create looks that you have no way to create in reality. For example, the popular VHS look comes from actual equipment, but if you don't own any, a plugin is a way to get that look without actually going through the expense of buying hardware. So instead of buying expensive or rare hardware, you can create that look in your computer. More about that in a later video. Another advantage is that creating the look in the edit is easily repeatable and keyframeable. You can have an effect coincide with an actor's performance without needing to get it right on set. For example, having interference cut out just the right if they're talking via video. You don't necessarily need extra plugins to get a specific look in the edit. If you're up for a challenge, you can build it yourself from scratch. The advantage of doing this is that you can get the exact look that you're going for. You might do this using only the built-in plugins in your software, but you could also use purchased plugins as part of your recipe. One primary reason for this is to create a look that just simply doesn't exist, or to replicate something that does exist with special hardware, but might be more expensive. Even so, one of the other reasons for making it from scratch is to simply use what you already have available to you, but this often comes at the expense of time. It will most likely take longer than using a plugin designed to do exactly what you're trying to emulate, but it can also be the most rewarding as you fit together all the puzzle pieces to get the exact look that you're trying to make. Whether you're using a plugin or creating it from scratch yourself, the advantage is they both will allow you to create a look that you might not be able to create any other way. The disadvantage of using software is that it can be hard to easily replicate a real-world effect or look. So if you want the ultimate realism, it's best to go with hardware. We'll come back to it, but I don't just mean video hardware. For example, if I put two circles over footage in the edit like this, it suggests that I'm looking through binoculars. It might be enough if I'm making a sketch, but if I'm making a dramatic narrative, the crude representation might pull the viewer out of the story. So to fake that, I might build something to go on the front of my lens that allows natural reflections, glare, aberrations, and scratches to be captured with the footage. Let me know if you're interested in seeing something like that. The trade-off to getting it super realistic in camera is that it's the least flexible method. What you get is what you get. You probably won't be able to modify it in any meaningful way after the fact, even to the point of requiring reshoots if it doesn't work out. Doing things in camera this way really goes beyond simple looks or filters and starts to become a practical effect. But in the case of, say, a VHS effect, you can have the best of both worlds. Record your scene with your modern equipment, and then run it through a VCR or other analog equipment and back into the edit. And of course, you can mix and match any of these methods as needed. Now let's take a look at some specific examples of how to put all this together. To put together a successful shot, you need to combine all these elements to plan a cohesive look. Simply adding a look to your footage without thinking about where you're going isn't enough if you want it to feel authentic. For my opening sequence in this video, I wanted to maintain the jump cuts between talking head clips, but try to emulate some different eras for each clip. Aside from planning how I would move from clip to clip with the constraints of my space, I lit each clip accordingly and changed costumes. Then I added the appropriate media emulation on each clip and tweaked it until I was happy. For the thermal camera, I originally intended to do a night vision look, but I ended up using it to make this. To accurately color it, I had to mask out parts of the image, color them, and put it back together with some graphics on top. For this analog look, I played the video over HDMI from my computer, through digital to analog converters and back into the computer where I re-recorded it with OBS. This is only one of the many ways to convert digital video to analog. There are various positives and negatives to building with plugins from scratch or with hardware. For this video, I used a lot of plugins as I styled the different shots because it allowed me to quickly iterate on the ideas and get to where the shot was decent, and some of these effects took longer to build because there was no plugin that could do what I wanted. Ultimately, it's up to you to use any or all of these methods to achieve the best results for your project. And make sure you subscribe so you don't miss some of the tutorials showing you how to build these looks from scratch.